Hey friends! This video is another botanical tutorial, and today in particular we are going to paint these fuchsia flowers. I'm going to show you how you can create a similar subject using your watercolor paints and your brushes. My name is Luisa and this is the Lulu Blue Studio. Let's start painting the fuchsia flowers together. I've decided to paint these fuchsia flowers because I find them original flowers and also I love the color combination. Therefore, I'm gonna guide you through this tutorial. It's super simple and you're going to be able to paint similar flowers also on your own. To start this composition, I've decided to take my round brush in size 12 just to define where I want the branch of these leaves to start from. And I've created a few brush strokes with some burnt amber and yellow ochre. Now, with my flat brush, I start to create the shape of the first leaf, and I've just used a little bit of water where I'm going to add some Viridian color. This is a color from my Mary, and a mixture also of a little bit of green earth and cobalt green dark to start to add this darker mixture into the water. I like to create this type of leaves with my flat brush because when I press I can create the thicker part of the leaf, and then with the tip of the brush I can just create the tip of these leaves. So this is a type of leaf that I like to create, but of course you can create these leaves also with a round brush if you don't have a flat one available. When I keep creating leaves, I have fun just adding different types of greens into these mixtures. And so I play with all of the greens that I have on my color palette. If you're interested to know which are the colors that I'm using when I paint, I've just created a video with all of the colors on my color palette, and I will link it in the description down below. So the first part of this tutorial is just to decide where you want these branches to start from and just give the definition of the major leaves. At this point we start then to create the flowers, and to create these flowers I'm using simply a round brush in size 6. I'm mixing a little bit of Quinacridone Magenta and I am giving this shape, first defining the head of this flower and then these big side petals and the belly of this flower that is created just using a little bit of water and the Quinacridone Magenta mixture from the petals, the side petals. After I've created the first shape of the biggest flower, I create another one a little bit more in the center of this composition. I start from the head of this flower and then I create the two side petals using some Quinacridone Magenta. With just water, I create the belly of this flower and I give it a round shape. Then I take a little bit of Scarlet Red and I mix this color into the Quinacridone Magenta. As you probably know by now, I really love to mix Scarlet Red and Quinacridone Magenta, and so this tutorial really gave me the chance to play with these two colors. You can create as many flowers in this style as you wish in your flower composition. I really wanted to give to this composition a flow of this flower, sort of a cascade of leaves and flowers from the upper right side of the page down to the bottom left area of this page. And so that's where I'm creating my flowers. The third flower has been created in the same way, but I mixed into Quinacridone Magenta a little bit of Quinacridone Purple, which is another color that I really love. My suggestion for you, when you want to add a new color on your composition, like I did in this case adding Quinacridone Purple, is to remember to mix a little bit of this new color, like in my case Quinacridone Purple, with some of the colors that you are already using in your painting. For example, in my case, I used Quinacridone Magenta and a little bit of Scarlet Red. And this will help you to create a composition that is more cohesive. At this point, with my brush in size 6 from Silver Black Velvet, I decided to add the center of these flowers, and I make them a little bit more loose compared to how these center parts are in real life, but I really had fun, and I used the fine tip of this brush and mixed a little bit of yellow ochre and lemon yellow to create these filaments. I'm using this brush because this is the brush I own with the finest tip, and it allows me to create these brush strokes that are completely different from the brush strokes I could obtain with any other round brush I have. If you are also passionate about painting loose style flowers in watercolor and you just started this journey, remember that you can always download for free the Beginner's Guide to Watercolor Flower Painting, which is an ebook of 18 pages that I wrote for all of the beginners out there that would like to improve their techniques in painting flowers. You can download your free guide by signing up for my newsletter, and you can do that by clicking on the link in the description down below. While I paint this composition, I always look at the balance of elements that I've painted, and so I check how many leaves I've created and what is the balance that I want to give with the flowers and the branches. And in this case I created the branches to attach these flowers, and also I started to notice where I wanted to add other elements. And so a suggestion that I would like to give you when you are painting any flower composition of any type, always look at what you have created and always take a step back to check and understand where you might want to add more elements. These can be leaves or secondary flowers, for example. So following this approach, I am adding more leaves, and I still use my flat brush and a very light green, type of green, that I will make darker by adding a few brush strokes while the first layer of the paint is still wet. The impression that I want to give is that when the observer looks at this composition, starts to look at this branch of flowers from the upper part of the page, and then looks at the whole composition going down, and let's say these leaves and the flowers and the branches themselves are sort of narrating the story and helping the observer to look at the whole composition. You can always start to create any elements, these can be flowers or leaves, with very light color values. It means that you can start to create the shapes of your elements, not using a lot of pigment onto your brush. And then when you like what you're creating while you're painting and your brush strokes have left on the page something that is still wet, you can always add darker brush strokes while the first layer still needs to be completely dry. At this point, with my fine brush, this is still the Silver Black Velvet brush, I start to add a few brush strokes in darker color. And so I've used a little bit of red and a little bit of Quinacridone Purple to create these brush strokes that highlight the shape of the petals of these flowers. I'm using the belly of this brush when I want to create something that is a little bit more predominant as a brush strokes, while instead I use just the tip of the brush when I want to create very fine brush strokes, some brush strokes that are not very evident in the composition. I am adding these brush strokes when the first layer of these petals is completely dry, and so these brush strokes are added through the wet on dry technique. I like to do this when I want to really highlight the shape of the petals, for example, of the flowers. If you would like your brush strokes to be, let's say, less defined compared to what I'm creating at the moment, you can always add these darker brush strokes while the first layer of the painting is still wet. And so the brush strokes you will add are going to blend with the first layer. At this point, I'm adding to the belly of these flowers a few lines in brilliant Ochre rose, just using the fine tip of my brush. Since the belly of these flowers has been created just with water, not even adding so much pigment, because I just used the Quinacridone Magenta coming from the side petals, these brushstrokes in brilliant Ochre rose will really pop from the belly of these flowers. And then with the same brush and just a little bit of gouache, I'm adding a few brush strokes in dark color. This is in dark brown color. You don't need to use gouache, but if you have it available, I think it really gives a nice kick because it's much more opaque compared to watercolor. And then with this same brush, I'm using some Azomethine green yellow to highlight some parts of these green leaves. I also like to mix this Azomethine green yellow with the darker greens that I have on my color palette, like Cobalt Green Dark. And with this darker type of green, I add a few brush strokes onto the leaves, and in particular I create some sort of fine lines into the leaves. It is up to you whether you want to add these brush strokes onto your dry leaves, and it's mainly based on the style you have while painting or what you aim to achieve. So for example, if you don't like these brush strokes, you can just skip this part, or you can remember to add brushstrokes while your leaves are still wet in order to obtain an effect that is more blended. As a final step, I try to create some contrasting elements by adding a few brush strokes in the dark color. Then, with yellow gouache, I just add a few brush strokes into the center of these flowers. Adding this yellow gouache will really help me to add some areas in bright yellow into the composition. But if you don't have gouache, remember that you can obtain a similar effect also using any bright yellow paint of your watercolor palette. I really hope you like this tutorial. Thank you for watching.